All right, we are recording. Megan, thank you so much for being here. Everybody watching right now, this is Megan Betker. She has been a longtime sponsor of the REINVESTORS meetup the last few years. She is a financial advisor with Century West. And the greatest thing that we love about working with Megan is that she is also a real estate investor. So she ties in the two financial worlds so well between budgeting and planning long term, as well as being really educated in the real estate space. And so we complement the meetup and complement our community extremely well. And I'm glad that you can be here on a quick recording today. Thank you so much. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm great. I'm talking to you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yeah, no, it's been a long time coming. We've been planning this for a little while now, and just our dates never kind of like matched together. And so there's been a lot of like built up anticipation for me. So
yeah, I know. No, I'm excited. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and with some of our new mentor clients, like a lot of the questions that we have here planned for today's discussion have been regular questions for me over the last little while. So pretty stoked on some of the content that we'll be talking about. And then we'll tie it back and forth into real estate. And our mission statement is we want to financially educate 1 million people and then inspire them to invest into real estate to live a more fulfilled life. So you fit right front and center.
Right in there.
Yeah,
perfect.
Into
yeah,
that.
well, it's really hard to be successful with your finances in real estate if you don't know what's going on with your finances in every other aspect of your life. So it does all meld together, right?
Yeah, totally. So jumping out of the gate here, what are like some of the typical problems that you would solve for your clients?
Typical problems that I see or have people coming to me for are people not knowing where their money is coming and going. Whether that they have a number of different rental properties, so they don't really know where all the sources are coming from, so they don't know where they're actually at the end of the day, or they maybe have some budgetary issues and they don't really have a full grasp of where all their money is going. Both of those can pose problems. So, and that's definitely something I see very often for people. It's just kind of getting all of that into one place and then having an idea of what direction to head.
Yeah. So when I moved in December from my house, from the condo I sold into where I'm at now on Cook Street, I went through all my visa statements and just like,
was it scary?
It was scary because I had little like $2 or $3 things or like $10 things that were monthly, like Spotify or Netflix or some of the apps that I use or a monthly recurring thing for like $4 or whatever. And I think I cut out like $200 a month out of my
good for you.
And I was like, why in the hell was I doing this in the first place?
But at that $2,500 a year almost, that's like a vacation that you just by just like honing in on one source of money that's going out, right?
Yeah.
So it can be huge. And I see that for a lot of people is just those we get nickel and dimed on those kind of things. And we don't really, and then at the end of the month, we're like, oh, well, where the heck did all of our money go? But we don't really think to sit down and look at the statements or maybe we're scared to find out where it actually went. I think that's a little bit of a thing too. We don't really want to know.
There's definitely a sense of fear there. And like, once you know what's happening, you're a lot more conscious of it. And then, there's that little devil on your shoulder that talks to you all the time. Whereas before you might be like, oh, this is a great jacket or a cool pair of shoes, or yeah, I could totally go for my 18th coffee at Starbucks today.
For sure. Yeah, you can be their biggest contributor for sure. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the, I guess I would probably say that's one of the primary issues that I see for clients that I deal with. Second would probably be people not having backup plans, so like emergency savings or emergency fund per se, or protection. So if things do go sideways or someone gets sick, there's no cushion to be able to ride those times, and then people end up relying on debt and it just becomes a really bad spiral where people don't know how to get out of that debt, but they keep accumulating it, and it's just a rabbit hole. And that's something that I focus on a lot with people, is just making sure, again, that I guess that kind of ties back into knowing where your money is coming and going. That way we can kind of determine how we can build those emergency funds, have that protection in place, and get ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think those would probably be the two most.
Right.
And then maybe confusion.
I mean, what?
Confusion, not sure where to put your money. There's so much, we innately put money into RSPs because maybe our parents told us that was what we were supposed to do. I know, like, when I was 18, my dad told me I had to start putting money into RSPs. I didn't really know what the heck an RSP was or why I was putting it in there, but I knew I was told that I was supposed to.
Right.
So there's kind of just that lack of education that people really are unsure of where is the best place to put their money for them and for their plans. I think that's a big one as well.
Yeah, and you said something. You said protection a minute ago, and so a big piece about real estate investing, just to tie things together here a little bit, is that we want to mitigate as much risk as possible, right? So we want to be as protected with the biggest upside possible with the least amount of downside possible. A lot of that, like, protection, right? So one of the things is like multiple exit strategies, right? So if you're doing a flip, and it's an up-down suite and you're renovating both halves or something like that, and let's say the market turns, well, one of the exit strategies to protect yourself would be to make sure that that property will cash flow or break even, so that if you can't flip it for a profit, you can at least hold it for a while, ride out the storm, and then flip it when it makes sense financially as the market changes. So in terms of protection for the line of work that you're doing, I know that health and life insurance would be a big piece of those. So for me specifically as a real estate investor, or a lot of people watching this in our community are real estate investors or want to be for sure, how does life or health insurance help us as real estate investors?
Again, it's about mitigating that risk. So for example, if someone goes into a joint venture arrangement, and they usually have like exit clauses, like you had mentioned, but those exit clauses don't necessarily touch on, well, what if your partner suddenly passes away? Or what if they are diagnosed with an illness and they need access to the money that they had invested in that property? Those things aren't really touched upon within that contract. So if you are like the alternate partner there, and that your partner comes to you and says, oh, you know what, I've been diagnosed with cancer, I really need this money to get for my additional medical expenses, and because me and my spouse are taking time off from work, we need to liquidate. So then there's that risk of either having to sell that property in maybe a down market where you're not actually going to see the benefits of the work that you put in. You may be down some of the costs. So having that protection in place just ensures that you're not risking having to liquidate that asset at a time that hasn't been specified within your agreement, right? Mm-hmm. So it just makes sure that everyone, no matter what happens, everyone can still maintain that agreement that you would already have in place.
That's awesome. That's huge because, a lot of times joint ventures, especially in our world where we're buying and holding, that joint venture contract can be 4, 5, 10 years long. Mm-hmm. And, if we're working with somebody who is 60, let's say, as an investor, then, 10, 15 years down the road, who knows what that person's health could be? Even my health, like shit.
Unfortunately, that's the thing, right? Like, most people don't plan on getting sick or they plan on having a disability, right? Like, these aren't things that we think are really realistically going to happen to us. We might in the back of our head be like, oh yeah, that could happen. But do we, as rational human beings, think that, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go to the doctor and get diagnosed with something? That's just not how we think.
Yeah.
So we're not going to build that necessarily into those contracts, but it really is important because those things do happen. And I've seen a number of deals, the partners really the whole contract be destroyed because of, and that even that relationship, it puts that relationship at jeopardy as well, because those risk mitigating factors weren't factored into that overall agreement, right?
Yeah, that's an awesome explanation. I think definitely people who are doing joint ventures or just in real estate in general as an investment piece, like a lot of times, say I passed away and I have a couple different properties, or if I got disabled in some way that I couldn't function as I do today, like my family and a lot of my friends aren't going to be able to take care of my portfolio. And so
or do they want to?
Or would they even want to?
You're also putting that on them to be able to, and they may not have the skill set that you do to be able to manage those, right?
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think is a huge market opportunity for people who are really active in the place right now. There is a massive transition of wealth happening, and it's the silver tsunami, where people who bought properties 30, 40 years ago and have been managing themselves, mom and pop investors, whether it be duplexes or small multis or even like medium-sized multis, a lot of those people are getting ready to sell, and a lot of their family don't know how to manage it correctly or don't want to. So for us as really active investors, it's a great space to go hunting. I'm going to change the combo just a quick second here. One of the topics of our last meetup, which was Tuesday, October 15th, was how government policy has changed real estate over the last 10 years. And one of the things that I came across as I was doing some of this research on it was that they implemented a credit score minimum, and then that has changed over time with other CMHC insured mortgages or some other things within that. So can you talk a little bit about credit scores, why it's important, and how somebody could maybe lift their credit score from either a 600 to a 650 or a 7 to a 750 or along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. Credit scores are important because when we go to access capital, lenders are going to be looking at that to assess their risk and our ability to repay that. So the higher the score, the less risky you are as a borrower. So you can definitely be getting more advantageous rates, offers, or you may even just be able to get the loan versus not be able to get it, right? Mm-hmm. So credit scores definitely, especially in the real estate investing world, if you have an awful credit score, that's going to make things tricky with the lenders. You could be forced into like private financing, which is going to cost you a lot more. So if you can kind of plan for building your credit preemptively, then you're definitely going to be further ahead. In terms of how to build your credit, there's certain rules of thumb that do help boost it. So your credit is based on a couple different factors. So it's going to be utilization. So how are you using that credit? So if you have, say, a credit card with a $10,000 balance or amount that you can actually borrow on there, and you say you're always maxed out, that works against you. So the recommended amount is not to go over 50% of a credit vehicle, and 30% is really the sweet spot of what is most advantageous to try to not go over. So if you can keep it under that 50 to, or even better, 30%, then that's going to definitely help your credit score. So that's one.
I just want to say one thing on that, which is really interesting. When I was growing up, my parents told me, keep your credit card low. Keep it low, keep it low, keep it low. So for the longest time, I had like, 500, $1,000. A lot of time it was like at 80% for a month or two for whatever reason, whether it be car breakdown or whatever. And had they known more about building credit, they would have been able to educate me, and I could have started boosting my credit limit way up there.
A lot easier.
Have a $20,000 limit, for example, and have that running at 5 or 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever as I grow and mature.
Yeah.
And it would be a completely different, rankings for me today had been able to build that from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know where your credit score is today, but I'm assuming that you have learned that in the meantime, or hopefully you have, so that it's been able to change that. But if you are going to be putting, say you're going to go put a trip on your credit card that's $5,000, unless you're able to literally go home and pay that back off, you really do want to make sure that you have access to a decent amount of credit so that you're not going above that 30 or 50%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. In terms of other things that affect with your credit is the types of vehicles that you have. You want to try and have two different types. So whether it's a credit card and a secured loan, those would be ideal, or like a line of credit. And then how long you've had those definitely plays in as well. So some people will, for example, pay off a loan or a line of credit, and then they'll be like, hey, I don't need it anymore, let's get rid of it. And they've had it for maybe 15 years. So there is 15 years of data tied to that account. So if you get rid of that, that could actually harm your credit score, even though it's completely paid off and you're not using it. So I've known a lot of people that have gotten rid of a loan like that and then seen their credit score go down because they lose that history. So you really want to be cautious with how you manage, I guess, any of your debt vehicles that you have available.
Right.
What would be others? Not paying it off.
Big one.
A lot of people think that you have to pay it off by the end of the month, but most lines of credit cards are not linked to the 30-day or whatever, the calendar month. So you really need to look at what your statement date is and try to make sure that you're getting those payments in before that statement date, because that's the day that's going to count, and that's what's going to go to the credit bureau and hit your credit score.
Yeah, and with most too, like you can set it up as an automatic payment. So I use my credit card for absolutely like every transaction I possibly can. I don't even carry around a debit card, and it's a travel card, so I get really great points for traveling. And I can't remember if I had to go into the bank or if it was just an online setting, but I think it's an online toggle.
You can do it online.
Yeah.
You can pretty much do everything online. Like the platforms that most of the top 5 banks and even some of the credit unions have now, they're pretty efficient.
Yeah.
Right? So they want you using them.
Yeah. And so I don't even think about it. I look at my statements, once every 2 months kind of thing. And I just use my credit card for everything. And then the magic behind the scenes automatically pays it off, and all is
magic.
Good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad you have the magic in place. But yeah, you can set up things like that. Or if you're more of a control freak like I am, I just know that I need to check it by a certain date. But that's just the control freaking.
I don't have that good a memory.
Fair enough. Well, I usually, so like I know my statement date, and then it's like a week before that I tell my mind that I have to check it. So even if I'm a couple days late, I still have some buffer in there. But.
Perfect. Speaking of not remembering things, I went through a whole budgeting process a couple of years ago, which really blew my mind, and it showed me similarly to like the credit card thing I was talking about earlier, where I found an extra $200 a month. For somebody starting off who's never created a budget before, whether you're 20 or 70, can you talk a little bit about formulating that structure and what you would recommend for people to create, a budget system and to track it and whatnot?
Yeah, so I guess to start off, like you really to start budgeting, my recommendation for most of my clients is print off or start tracking like the next 2 to 3 months of your spending, or look back at your history. So you can pull your statements off of online, your visa statements and all those, and really look at where your money's going and start adding that up and then funneling it into a budget template so you can see what you think you're going to spend on these areas versus what you are actually doing. And a lot of people are unfortunately shocked in that regard, but usually that can be a really big motivating factor to try to get down to where we think we should be in those regards. And then controlling aspects that we are able to. So we're both in Victoria. We know that mortgages and rent are very expensive. They're not really things that we can easily manipulate, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, well, I'm going to go find a cheaper 3-bedroom. Well, no, you're not.
Good luck.
That's not the case. You're going to be lucky if you can find a box to live in, right? Like it's not going to happen. So really controlling the aspects in your budget that you are able to. So a huge area that I see people spend the most of their resources on is groceries or eating out / coffee and things of that nature. Groceries is one of those things that we can plan a little bit better and really mitigate how much is just getting put out into like our pantries and things like that, right? What are some of the other factors of budget? I think just sitting down and looking at the budget gives people again, like I said, most of my clients that come to me that don't know where their money is coming and going. So once we can start seeing where things are coming and going, it's a lot easier to just hone in on what we need to be making changes to.
Yeah. One of the biggest things for me was just being able to track it. So, you know, I think as I've grown my mindset the last few years of being an entrepreneur, running a business, and just trying to develop as a person, you know, I try to track as much as I can. So that would be budget. That would be my fitness level, you know, my overall happiness level as well. So I track a lot in my life. And even like the day-to-days, about 2 or 3 months ago, I just felt like I wasn't being productive. I felt like I had to do more. And so I started tracking everything I did in a day. The people I talked to, the emails I sent, you know, the walks I went for around the block, whatever I could, I would just have a Google sheet on my phone and just track it whenever I had, you know, 5 minutes in between meetings or something. And the first few days I was like, holy man, like I'm doing like 26 things a day. Like that's pretty good. Yeah, that's not bad at all. And then like I watched that for about a month where it was like 27, and then I dropped down to 16, and then I was like, why did I drop down to 16 today? Like maybe it was like longer paced meetings, or maybe it was just a lazy day or something like that. And being able to track it really gave me the peace of mind that I wanted. Like, oh yeah, I'm actually being productive, but maybe I can be more productive in a certain space. Now, whether that be, you know, into my budgeting and tracking my spending more, limiting my spending more. You know, one of the biggest things that I'm guilty for was miscellaneous spending, right? I'd walk past a kick-ass hat and I'd be like, you're mine. and then like, you know, Victoria's like one of the beer capitals of Canada, I find. So like tasty beers is also a guilty pleasure. But is there something that through that tracking process, like, is there a rule of thumb of like what your income should be to what you save for like a retirement side of things, or for buying real estate, or for any kind of calculation like that you found that works well for your clients?
Not a specific percentage across the board. It doesn't seem to work that easily. It's easy to say, yeah, our housing cost is supposed to be no more than 30% of our income. Like unfortunately, that's not realistic for most people in Victoria or in this area especially. So I kind of shifted away from trying to put people into this box of, okay, well, this is how it should be. Instead of looking at like all the resources and where their money is going, and trying to determine how we can bring some of that in. So maybe not buying that hat and putting that money into whether it's our retirement savings or saving for a property or things like that nature. Like, we really do need to be concentrating on paying ourselves. So it's really easy to pay the stores. But we have a really hard time paying ourselves, right? Like, we go to work every day, but we don't necessarily think that, oh, well, we should take some money out of there for savings, because that's what's paying ourselves. That's paying our future self, right? And I think that that's a really big miss in a lot of people's budgets, because we get so fixated on not really wanting to give up our guilty pleasures, or just to trying to make ends meet. But yeah, really getting that in there I do think it's a really important aspect.
Yeah.
And in terms of tracking those things, there's so many apps. Like, I bank with 2 different financial institutions, and both of them have pretty decent online tracking, like just in their online portals. So that's what I personally use. But there's a number of apps that will draw information from those bank accounts and filter it in so that you're able to kind of track. Or again, you can kind of go a little bit like the archaic ways, just print out your statements at the end of the month and or each week even, and go back there and look at that. I'm a really big fan of 𝐟𝐢𝐧𝐚𝐧𝐼, and that would be like doing the money in the envelopes, or you can do it. I do it a little bit more technologically friendly, so different accounts for different amounts, and then you know where your money is and what you have. You know how many hats you can buy in a month, or how many craft beers you can try.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing that I think is really powerful. Like, one of the apps that I've seen people do is, like, say a coffee costs you $4.25. That's 75 cents from $4.
Oh, rounding up.
Rounding up, and then just putting that into a savings account. a buddy of mine who I just got off the phone with before this call. We do a Thursday morning accountability call through Thrive, entrepreneur group that we're part of. And he did it, and like he just looked at it over like 2 years, completely forgot that he was doing it. He's like, oh man, I got like $6,000 in here. And so that could be a really powerful way, like over time, to basically like penny save. And then over time, you're like, oh, sweet, I got $6,000 or whatever it is. Like you can go have a, that's almost that's close to a down payment for a 5% down, like condo or something. And, or you can go for a beautiful trip or new car, or, halfway to a down payment at least. And so
there's a lot of like little changes that you can make, such as that can make a big difference, right? Like for me personally, I noticed, well, this is a long time ago because I've been a Starbucks fan for a long time, but like I was spending a lot of money on Starbucks in a month. So what I started to do instead was I'd buy one gift card of $50 a month, or whatever amount it was. Mine is $50. And that is how much Starbucks I can buy for myself or to go for meetings in a month. And I don't get to buy a second Starbucks card. So that really, instead of just constantly throwing out my debit card and then looking back at the month and being like, holy crap, I just spent $120. That's $70 different I could be putting into that savings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are really just some little tweaks that you can make that don't make budgeting as painful as people think it is or feel like it is.
I think for any starter who's looking at starting to create a budget for themselves, regardless of what their end point is you have to set yourself some limits and then be very disciplined and consistent with that over time. And so if it is, that was a really great example, I'm a Starbucks-aholic. There's one a block away from my house, so I go there all the time.
That's dangerous.
Don't tell my fiance. One of those things could be like limit, your hat spending or your beer fund or your Starbucks fund or your gasoline, right? And maybe buy a bicycle and you say like, what, I'm only going to drive one tank this next 2 weeks. And then I got to try to integrate more cycling into your budget. And so setting limits and then being strict on yourself to abide by those limits is going to be really, really important for anybody starting or committing to a budget.
Absolutely.
And a couple minutes ago, you mentioned like registered savings plans, so RSPs, etc. One of those would be, not one of those specifically, but another option would be TFSA. Can you just mention a little bit about some of the more common ones? Because one of the things that we run into as real estate investors all the time is that we specifically show people how to like leverage their property to get access into their equity that's there and then reinvest that equity. So if you can get, if you've got $400,000 of equity, pick out a couple $100,000, you're paying 4% on that money. But then if you can go invest that into 10%, you're still making 6%. Mm-hmm. And so that is a phenomenal way to grow your wealth and build your portfolios, just by re-leveraging. But we also run into people who maybe just bought a house, don't have that equity there, but have a ton of money packed into an RRSP, for example. So as investors, maybe they're getting 4% somewhere with whatever fund. What can they do to increase that ROI? And then maybe just starting off this for you, what is an RSP, TFSA, et cetera?
Okay, so RSP is a registered savings account, a government program essentially. TFSA, again, another government program, the tax-free savings account. So the difference between those two, the RSP is registered in the fact that it's also the money that you put in there, it becomes a tax deduction. So it reduces your taxable income. That money goes into there, which is really why a lot of people do put it in there, because they want that reduction of income for how much taxes they owe at the end of the year. Within that vehicle, there are a number of stipulations of how you can access that money, which I see become a very big wall for a lot of people down the road. So the whole premise behind that program is that you're going to be putting this money in there for retirement, so that when you are retired and likely in a lower income tax bracket, then you're going to be pulling that money out and paying less tax on it than you would now. So that's the idea behind that. Obviously, there's the compounding growth in there, so that's a good feature. The tax-free savings account, that was instituted in 2009. And each year the amount that we can contribute does increase. Any money that we put in there, does not reduce our taxable income. So it's just money that we've already paid tax on that we're putting in there. But anything that is earned in there, we are not taxed on. So it's tax sheltered, which is a huge advantage to that type of account if you're going to be putting money, like saving money in a vehicle, versus just putting it in a regular savings account where if you receive dividends or interest, you're paying taxes on that at the end of the year. So those are the kind of the three different vehicles. For people that have a ton of money in RSPs, I see it. For real estate investors, it can be a really big holdup because they can't easily access that money without being substantially penalized with withholding taxes. And obviously, if they took a large amount out, then that, again, goes into their taxable income for that year. And they're going to lose a substantial amount of that. So I've seen a lot of people use different trust companies to be able to potentially private lend or do syndicate mortgages. It's not something I do personally, but I've seen a lot of people be really successful in it and get really decent returns there. But with that, that is definitely a higher risk tolerance individual that's going to be comfortable doing that. So what you're investing in these vehicles is really personal per person, right? Like, so if a person is conservative, they're not likely going to be comfortable going that route. But in terms of actually getting that money out to use for other means, it's pretty tricky. Which is why I'm a big advocate for using the tax-free savings account to its maximum, because that money is accessible. So while we earn money in there that's not taxed, we are able to withdraw that at any point in time. And then we regain that contribution room in the following calendar year. So it's not just gone either, like our RSPs. So I find that to be a really good vehicle for people that do want to invest in real estate. That's a great place to park their money. They can invest in ETFs, stocks, bonds, really anything that suits their risk tolerance within that, and then go do with whatever they actually want in the end. So I definitely try to encourage people to use that TSFA. A lot of people are really confused about what it is and why they would use it. There's not a whole lot of education behind that.
Yeah.
So people get fixated on the RSPs or just the regular savings accounts that our pretty little banks offer us at maybe 1% interest. Yeah. We're only losing about a point of interest based on inflation, right? So
yeah. I know it's a little ridiculous when you start to learn that, banks are giving you 1% or something like that. And you can go find, a private lending deal on a very conservative level at 8, 9, 10% all day long.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
A lot of those pieces are well vetted or can be well vetted. And there's a lot of pieces in place, like we were talking about earlier, like protecting your money in that space. Like you get paid out first before others and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so circling around like the TFSA thing, I think your max now is what, like 62,000 or so?
66,500, I believe.
So let's say somebody had a maxed out TFSA and they're like, sweet, I want to invest this into something bigger and better. Someone's going to give me better returns or whatnot. Where would you advise people put that? Or what's the process of talking to a client to figure out, what the risk tolerance is or what they want to go and venture into?
It's really hard to tell a person to say just a blanket statement of where someone should put that money because it, like, especially in my field, it has to be based on their risk tolerance, what they're comfortable with withstanding to gain as well as lose, right? Like, our markets are volatile, and people need to be, especially right now, they need to be aware that there is potential downside. And if they're not comfortable with that, then we really need to be finding something that's going to be a lot more conservative for them. That being said, there's so many different options. ETFs are great. They track the market. I see a lot of people go into those. Mutual funds, you have to be cautious of some of the MERs, like some of the fees that are attached. You can find some that are the lower fees and are having generous returns. And when I say generous, I'm not throwing out like 10% and things like that. But again, it's going to be correlated to what your risk tolerance is. If you can't risk losing any money, the chance for upside gain is also going to be limited.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I just got an inheritance, and to me, it's just like free money. Where's the biggest place, the highest risk, the highest return place you'd recommend me go?
Highest return, real estate, and a lot of people think that real estate is very risky. That's where I would go. I don't know that I'm a real estate investor, right? So I personally do put a lot of my resources there. I am well diversified, but if I have a chunk of money, it is likely that you're going to see me personally putting it in real estate. While there's of course downside to real estate, and there's a number of people that will disagree that that's a good place to park your money. I've done really well in it, and I think if you are making calculated risks, then the historical data for real estate is that it's been an upward trend, just like the stock market and things like that. So if you can play it as a long-term game, I wouldn't say do that if you have a year turnaround and then you need that money. But you got to be looking in the long term. Investing really is based on the long term. It's not based on the next year or two.
Yeah, that short-term piece is investing, that's gambling. Whether you're at a casino, in real estate, or playing stocks, if it's a short-term play, it's usually gambling. I'm betting.
It's speculative, right? Because we are speculating that the market's going to go up or it's not going to lose, or that the real estate market is going to continue to go up. And as we see now, we see it softening a bit. So we have to be able to ride that softening out, right? So it's considering all of those risks before you go into it, to make sure that it's suitable for you and when you need your money out, if you do need your money out, right?
Yeah. So Megan, you've been a huge sponsor of ours. You're a phenomenal resource. What are some ways that people can get a hold of you if they want to contact you and just have a chit chat?
Well, I am active in the real estate community, so like in the Facebook community. So you can always reach out to me on Facebook. I will post my email and my phone number in there. If anyone wants to reach out to me and have a personal chat, I would be happy to do that. Or touch base with you or Randy, and you guys can definitely get some information.
Sweet.
I'm always happy to answer questions if people just have like one-offs in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said at the very beginning of this call, like, because you're a real estate investor, you can talk on both sides. A lot of times you're working with like a financial advisor, or planner, or whatever, and they're just strictly into their own little narrow scope of mutual funds or something. And because you have a diverse education and knowledge on like all levels, you're such a great resource to tap into and use and to work with. Just before we wrap up, I got one other question for you. Two quick announcements. One, our next meetup is November the 19th, I believe. I'm just going to double check that real quick. Third Tuesday of every single month, we get together at Gorge Vale. It is the 19th of November. It's going to be a really awesome night. We're going to be talking about different types of passive income, or different types of creating income through real estate. And then we are about to narrow down our Christmas mixer, which is by far—
Oh, perfect.
I know.
They're always amazing.
They're always amazing. Thank you. They're by far the best event of the year to go to. And, our venues have changed over the years. They've always got a little bit of pizzazz to them. And the two that we're looking at right now, one of them has like next level pizzazz to it.
Oh, wow.
So we're
stepping up your game.
Oh, yeah.
Mind blown. And you know what? Every year you guys have been able to give back more to kids sports. So
yeah, we've been able to—
that's a huge component of that end of year mixer, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We bring in some entertainment. There's some really great silent auction items. We did a live auction last time. We had a magician come around. And then, our meetups are very educational based. So you sit down, you learn, you have a few minutes to chit chat and network with people. But this is a really special time to be able to connect with people on a more individual, personal level, because it's a few hours of just straight up networking, and not like your typical like business network side of things where it's like business cards all over the place. It's a lot of fun. It's super laid back and chill. You know, we swagger up a little bit. And
which is when people's creativity comes out the most, right? Like you don't know who you're going to meet at these type of events. If you're, especially for the people that are involved in real estate, it's really great place to pick people's minds, what they're doing, what they want to be doing, and you never know where that can go.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know who your neighbor is, right? And or who the person across from the table is. You might just find your next partner or lender or somebody who just knows a bunch
Mentor.
Of you.
You never know.
Or absolutely. So we're really looking forward to it. It's like I said, it's my favorite event of the year, and we give to a great cause. Hoping to double it again. It'd be great to hit that like 5-digit number this year. So we're gonna pull some magic out, literally and figuratively, to have some really cool door prizes and silent auction items. For the last question of the day, just to wrap things up real quick, is there anything else that you want to share with people?
Oh, that's a pretty broad one. Not as focused as I would like. I think just be open to learning about real estate, to looking at your finances, because fear of getting involved in real estate or budgeting or trying to make a long-term retirement plan, that's what's going to hold you back the most in the end. So if there's a way, or you can partner up with someone to try to take some of that fear out, I would definitely.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time that you shared with us today. And we will see you next meetup for sure. And if anybody has any questions or wants to get a hold of Megan, she's going to post her digits and email and website down below in the comments. And she's great. Reach out to her. Definitely a wonderful lady to speak with. And all the best to you and Cruise and your hubby. And
thank you.
we'll see you soon, Megan.
Rein in those hat spending.
You know what? I've only bought one hat this year, which is.
Oh, okay. You're doing okay.
it was a write-off because it had our logo on it.
Oh, then you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, Steve.
Awesome. Have a great one.
You too.